horrifyingly. Can you imagine this? A wealthy, powerful man sitting calmly in first class on a trans-Pacific flight suddenly hears the pained cry of a poor baby echoing from economy class. And in that single moment, his cold heart explodes with a fierce, obsessive love, willing to trade away the entire criminal empire he built over years just to protect this stranger and her 3 children? Could one child's cry completely change the fate of 5 people from 2 utterly opposite worlds? Join me as we explore this tear-jerking love story full of tragedy, sacrifice, and unbelievable redemption, right now. Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Crimson Romance Stories and like this video. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions, or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. All right, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. I sat in the wide leather seat of first class, the dim cabin lights casting long shadows across the polished armrests. The hum of the engines was a constant, low thrum, familiar to me after countless flights between Seoul and Los Angeles. It was October of this year, 2025, and I had just wrapped up another round of negotiations that left my hands clean on paper, but my soul stained deeper than ever. My name is Alexander Kang, fair-skinned, Korean by blood, but American in every way that mattered. Born in Koreatown, raised on the streets of Los Angeles, and now the unspoken king of its shadows. Wealth came easily to men like me. Private jets when I wanted them, but tonight I chose commercial, first class, to blend in just enough. My tailored black suit fit like armor, hiding the tension in my shoulders, the way my jaw clenched even in sleep. Beside me, in the window seat, sat my son Min Jae. 6 years old, quiet as always, his small hands folded neatly in his lap, staring at the screensaver on the entertainment system, a looping video of ocean waves he had chosen because the patterns soothed him. He was autistic, my boy, and the world was often too loud, too chaotic for him. I glanced at him, my chest tightening with that familiar ache, the fierce protectiveness that warred with the guilt gnawing at my insides. I had built an empire on ruthlessness, on deals sealed in back rooms and threats whispered over expensive whiskey. But for him, I would burn it all down. Yet the guilt never left. The late nights I missed, the dangers I brought too close. He deserved better than a father fractured by his own choices. The flight attendant moved through the cabin, offering warm towels and menus. I waved her away politely. I wasn't hungry. My mind was elsewhere, replaying a tense meeting earlier that day in Seoul, where a rival faction had tested my patience with veiled threats. My men had handled it discreetly, but the violence simmered beneath my calm exterior, a storm I kept leashed. Loneliness was my constant companion these days, a profound emptiness that no amount of power filled. My wife gone years ago, leaving only Min Jae and the echoes of what could have been a normal life. Then, cutting through the quiet murmur of the plane, came a sound that pierced straight to my heart, a baby's cry, raw and desperate, rising from the economy section behind the curtain. It wasn't the usual fussing, this was pain, feverish and unrelenting. The cries escalated, mingled with a mother's soft, exhausted pleas. "Shh, baby girl, please, mommy's here." The voice was soft, restrained, laced with a timid desperation that made my blood run cold. I shifted in my seat, trying to ignore it, but Min Jae tilted his head, covering his ears lightly, his eyes wide. I stood quietly, telling my bodyguard in the seat across the aisle to stay put. Curiosity, or something deeper, pulled me toward the curtain. I parted it just enough to see her, an African-American woman, perhaps in her late 20s, slumped in a middle seat far back in economy. She looked emaciated, her frame thin from what must have been months of skipped meals, her dark skin ashen with exhaustion. Her hair was pulled back in a weary ponytail, strands escaping like signs of surrender. She cradled a toddler, 18 months old, maybe, in her arms. The little girl's face flushed red with fever, tears streaming as she wailed and pushed away a bottle. Beside the woman sat another child, a boy of about 4, curled up asleep despite the noise, his small body too thin, clothes worn and patched. The mother rocked the baby, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights, her hands trembling. She whispered apologies to the glaring passengers around her, her voice timid, respectful even in despair. "I'm sorry, she's sick. I'll try to quiet her." One man muttered loudly about upgrading next time. Another woman sighed in annoyance. The unfairness hit me like a fist. These people in their comfortable seats, judging her for circumstances they couldn't imagine. Hunger, cold winds sweeping through cracked apartment windows, eviction notices, nights without heat. I knew poverty from my early days, but this was raw, heartbreaking. A young mother at the absolute edge, humiliated in public, powerless against the world's cruelty. My heart twisted violently, guilt surging anew. How many times had my world contributed to the injustices that crushed people like her? The inner turmoil raged. I was a man of immense wealth, private compounds in Bel Air, fleets of cars, yet here was destitution mere feet away. And then, as the turbulence hit and the cries peaked, something ruptured inside me. Her face, hopeless, destitute, yet fiercely protective, stirred a burning affection I hadn't felt in years. Immediate, explosive, passionate. It overwhelmed me, a fierce surge of love for this stranger, this broken woman fighting alone. Dizziness washed over me. I gripped the seat back, shocked at the intensity. Why her? Why now? But there it was, anchoring me, pulling me forward. I couldn't stand by, not this time. The plane bucked again, harder this time, as we passed through another pocket of rough air high above the Pacific. The seatbelt sign chimed overhead, but I was already moving, drawn forward by a force I could neither name nor resist. My bodyguard Victor half rose in his seat across the aisle, one eyebrow raised in silent question. I shook my head once, sharp, final, and he settled back, though his eyes tracked me all the way to the curtain that separated first class from the rest of the world. I pushed the heavy fabric aside and stepped into economy. The crying hit me like a physical blow. It was no longer just sound, it was anguish made audible, a thin, high wail that clawed at every nerve. The little girl, Kamaya, I would learn her name later, thrashed in her mother's arms, her tiny face scarlet with fever, sweat darkening the curls at her temples. The bottle trembled in the woman's hand, milk spilling onto the worn blanket draped over both of them. Her older child, a boy of maybe 4 named Jamal, had curled himself into the smallest possible ball in the window seat, thumb in mouth, eyes squeezed shut against the noise and the shaking plane. And the mother, Aisha Thompson, though I did not yet know that either, sat in the middle seat, trapped between strangers who now glared at her with open resentment. She was trying so hard to be invisible, to shrink into nothing, apologizing in that soft, restrained voice that carried the weight of too many apologies already given in her short life. "I'm so sorry. She's burning up. I'm trying." Her words were barely audible over the crying, but they broke something open inside me. I saw the hollows beneath her eyes, the sharp edges of collarbones visible beneath a thin hoodie 2 sizes too big. I saw the way her hands shook from exhaustion and hunger, the cracked skin on her knuckles from nights spent scrubbing floors or washing dishes for minimum wage. I saw the plastic grocery bag at her feet that held everything she owned for this trip. Diapers, a single change of clothes for each child, a half-eaten pack of crackers. The rawness of her poverty struck me like a slap. No luggage, no cushion, no safety net, just her body between her children and the world. A man in a business suit 2 rows ahead turned fully in his seat. "For God's sake, can't you keep her quiet? Some of us paid good money for this flight." Aisha flinched as if he had struck her. Her shoulders folded inward, making her seem even smaller. "I'm trying, sir. I really am." The injustice of it burned through me. This man, comfortable in his upgraded seat, complaining about a sick baby while the mother beside her starved herself to feed them. My empire was built on controlling outcomes, on making men like him bend with a single glance, yet here I stood helpless in the face of ordinary cruelty. Guilt, old, familiar, corrosive, surged alongside the new violent emotion that had taken root the moment I saw her face. That burning affection, already fierce, now flared into something almost painful. I wanted to shield her from every cold glance, every muttered complaint, every eviction notice and empty refrigerator that had brought her to this moment. The plane lurched again. Aisha lost her balance for a heartbeat, nearly dropping the bottle. Kamaya's cries reached a new, heartbreaking crescendo. A flight attendant hurried down the aisle, face tight with professional concern masking irritation. "Ma'am, if you can't calm her, we may need to—" I stepped forward before the sentence could finish. "Move," I said quietly to the businessman who had complained. My voice was low, but it carried the authority I had spent years perfecting. He turned, opened his mouth, then saw my face, my suit, the way Victor now stood just behind the curtain, and thought better of it. He turned back around without a word. I lowered myself into the empty aisle seat beside Aisha. Up close, the reality of her exhaustion was even more devastating. Her eyes, beautiful, dark, framed by lashes clumped with unshed tears, widened in confusion and fear as she registered who I was. The man from first class. The one with the expensive watch and the silent bodyguard. Her body tensed, preparing for another reprimand. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered immediately, voice trembling. "I know she's loud. I'll try harder." The apology nearly undid me. I raised one hand, not touching her, never touching without permission, and spoke as gently as I could manage around the storm inside my chest. "You have nothing to be sorry for." Her breath caught. She stared at me, disoriented, as if kindness from a stranger was a language she no longer understood. The fear in her eyes shifted into something more complex. Caution, suspicion, a flicker of desperate curiosity. Who was I to speak to her this way? Kamaya chose that moment to scream again, arching her back in pain. Aisha's face crumpled. Tears finally spilled over, tracking down her cheeks as she rocked faster. "I don't know what else to do," she confessed in a broken whisper. "She won't take the bottle. The medicine wore off hours ago. I can't." The words tore at me. I felt the rupture deep in my core, the violent collision between my guilt-soaked past and this overwhelming need to protect her, to fix this, to give her back some measure of dignity. The affection I felt was no longer a surge, it was a flood, fierce and absolute, threatening to drown every careful wall I had built around my heart. I reached slowly into the inner pocket of my suit jacket and withdrew the small silk pouch my mother had sewn for me decades ago. Inside was a traditional red ginseng cooling patch, the kind Korean grandmothers pressed to fevered foreheads. I held it out, palm up, making the offering clear. "May I?" I asked softly. Aisha stared at the pouch, then at my face, confusion deepening into something close to shock. No one had offered her help without wanting something in return. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Finally, she nodded, barely perceptible. With careful, deliberate movements, I peeled the backing from the patch and pressed it gently to Kamaya's forehead. The little girl quieted almost instantly, startled by the coolness. Her cries tapered into hiccuping sobs. And then, because I could not stop myself, I began to sing. The lullaby my mother sang to me on cold nights in our tiny Koreatown apartment. Ariran, soft and steady, the melody carrying centuries of longing and resilience. My voice was low, meant only for the three of them, mother, daughter, son. Jamal stirred, peeking out from his curled position. Aisha's eyes never left my face, wide with disbelief and something else, something fragile and dangerous. As the plane steadied and the cabin lights dimmed further, Kamaya's eyelids fluttered. She took the bottle at last, drinking greedily while the cooling patch did its work. Aisha's shoulders began to shake, not from cold, but from the release of tension held too long. I kept singing until the bottle was empty and the little girl slept against her mother's chest. Only then did I allow myself to meet Aisha's gaze fully. Her eyes were swimming with tears, but beneath the exhaustion and fear, something new flickered. Gratitude so profound it bordered on awe. And in that moment, under the recycled air and fluorescent hum of a red-eye flight, 30,000 feet above an indifferent ocean, I knew with absolute certainty that my carefully ordered life had just shattered beyond repair. Because I was already, irrevocably, in love with her. The cabin lights had dimmed to a soft amber glow, the kind meant to lull passengers into uneasy sleep across time zones. Most of the plane had settled into an uneasy quiet, broken only by the occasional cough or rustle of blankets. I remained in the aisle seat beside Aisha, my body angled toward her and the children, as if I could form a shield with sheer presence alone. Victor had moved discreetly to a seat 2 rows back, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. I could not bring myself to return to first class. Min-jae, sensing the shift in my absence, had followed quietly and now sat in the empty seat across the aisle, his small legs dangling as he watched the sleeping baby with a focused intensity I recognized all too well. Patterns, rhythms, the rise and fall of Kamaya's chest, he was cataloging them the way he cataloged everything, finding order in the chaos that so often overwhelmed him. He did not speak, but his eyes flicked occasionally to Aisha's face, then to mine, as if trying to understand the invisible thread that now connected us all. Aisha herself sat frozen, Kamaya finally asleep against her shoulder, the cooling patch still in place. The little boy, Jamal, had uncurled slightly and now leaned against his mother's side, one small hand clutching the edge of her hoodie as if afraid she might vanish. Aisha's breathing was shallow, careful, as though any sudden movement might shatter the fragile peace. She kept her gaze lowered, fixed on her daughter's face, but I could feel the weight of her awareness. Every second that I remained beside her stretched her nerves tighter. I understood the suspicion. A man like me, tailored suit, unmistakable air of authority, did not sit in economy offering help without expecting payment. In her world, kindness from strangers always carried a hidden cost. Rent overdue, lights threatened, food stamps stretched too thin. She had learned early that the world took more than it gave. The humiliation of accepting charity, even small, was a wound that never fully closed. I saw it in the way her free hand trembled against her thigh, in the careful way she avoided meeting my eyes directly. Yet beneath the fear and caution, something else stirred, curiosity, wary and fragile. She stole glances at me when she thought I wasn't looking, at my hands, folded quietly in my lap, at the expensive watch I wore, its face catching the low light, at the way Min-jae sat so still, mirroring my own restrained posture. Confusion flickered across her features each time. Why was I still here? Why had I not demanded anything? Why had I sung to her child in a language she did not know, yet one that had calmed Kamaya when nothing else could? The inner storm inside me raged harder with every passing minute. Guilt, that old companion, clawed deeper. How many families like hers had been crushed beneath the machinery of my empire? The neighborhoods I controlled, the debts I collected, the corners where desperation bred faster than hope. I had justified it all as survival, as providing for Min-jae, as necessary in a city that devoured the weak. But seeing Aisha's emaciated frame, the way her ribs showed faintly beneath the thin fabric when she breathed, the knowledge that she had likely given her own portions to her children night after night, it tore at me with a violence I had not felt since losing my wife. And woven through the guilt was the love, impossible, immediate, consuming. It was not gentle or gradual, it was a rupture, a burning that seared away every careful layer of control I had built over years of isolation. I wanted to gather her and the children into the safety of my world, to erase every cold night, every skipped meal, every moment of humiliation. The intensity of it left me dizzy, off balance, as if the plane's altitude had suddenly thinned the air in my lungs. I gripped the armrest discreetly, steadying myself against the emotional freefall. Aisha shifted slightly, adjusting Kamaya's weight. The movement brought her knee inches from mine. She froze again, breath catching, fear flashing across her face, as if accidental closeness might provoke me. I remained perfectly still, giving her the space to decide. Slowly, cautiously, she relaxed by degrees, though her body remained coiled. Finally, in a voice so soft it was almost lost beneath the engines, she spoke. Why are you doing this?" The question hung between us, raw and vulnerable. She did not look at me when she asked it, her eyes fixed on Kamaya's sleeping face, but I heard everything beneath the words. The dread that this was a transaction, the fear that kindness would twist into something cruel, the deep disorientation of receiving gentleness from a stranger who clearly belonged to a world far removed from hers. I considered my answer carefully. The truth, that I had fallen in love with her in the space of a single desperate cry, was too much, too soon. Instead, I offered what I could. "Because I have a son who understands when the world is too loud," I said quietly. "And because no child should suffer while others look away." Her head lifted then, just enough for our eyes to meet. Shock widened hers, dark, exhausted, but still beautiful in their honesty. For a heartbeat, the suspicion wavered, replaced by something aching and unguarded. Then the walls slammed back into place, and she looked away again, swallowing hard. Min-jae chose that moment to lean across the aisle, extending one small hand toward Jamal, who had stirred and was now watching us with wide, wary eyes. My son did not touch the boy. Min-jae rarely initiated contact, but he held his palm open, an offering of connection in the only way he knew. Jamal hesitated, then placed his much smaller hand against Min-jae's. They stayed like that, two children from worlds oceans apart, linked by quiet understanding. Aisha watched them, tears welling again. One slipped free, tracing a path down her cheek. She dashed it away quickly, embarrassed, but not before I saw the emotional rupture it betrayed. The overwhelming relief of witnessing her son accepted without judgment, the pain of knowing how rarely that happened. I wanted to reach for her hand, to promise her everything would be different now, but I restrained myself, knowing touch would frighten her more. Instead, I sat in silence, letting the quiet moment stretch, letting her feel the safety I was determined to provide, even if only for the remaining hours of this flight. Outside the window, the first hints of dawn painted the horizon gold. Inside, in the dim cabin, something irreversible had begun. The contrast between my life, private compounds, armed guards, power that bent reality, and hers, hunger, exhaustion, the constant edge of loss, had never been clearer. And yet, in this suspended space above the world, the distance between us felt, for the first time, bridgeable. I would find a way to cross it, whatever the cost. The silence that followed my lullaby felt almost sacred, a fragile bubble in the midst of the plane's mechanical roar. Kamaya's breathing had evened out, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm against Aisha's. Jamal had drifted back to sleep, his head now resting trustingly against Min-jae's arm across the aisle. My son, for his part, remained perfectly still, allowing the contact, a rare gift of tolerance from a boy who usually recoiled from unexpected touch. Aisha stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and deep disorientation. The cooling patch on Kamaya's forehead glistened faintly in the low light, and the bottle lay empty in Aisha's lap, a small victory amid such overwhelming defeat. Her lips parted several times as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, tears continued to fall silently, tracing paths through the exhaustion etched on her face. She dashed them away with the back of her hand, embarrassed, fearful that any display of weakness might shatter whatever strange mercy had brought me here. I understood the whirlwind inside her. One moment, the world had been closing in, glaring strangers, a sick child, the humiliation of public failure as a mother. The next, a man from another universe entirely had knelt beside her, sung in a foreign tongue, and calmed the storm. It was too much, too sudden. Dizziness flickered in her expression. She swayed slightly, gripping the armrest for balance as emotional numbness threatened to overtake the initial flood of relief. Inside my own chest, the turmoil reached a new, violent peak. The love I felt for her. It was no longer a surge, it was a cataclysm, burning through every defense I had constructed over years of loss and isolation. Fierce, passionate, absolute. I wanted to shield her from everything. The cold winds that had bitten through thin walls on winter nights, the gnawing hunger that had forced her to choose between her children's meals and her own. The sleepless hours spent worrying over bills that never stopped coming. My wealth mocked me now. The private accounts that could erase her debts in a single transfer, the influence that bent city officials to my will, the armed men who ensured no one touched what was mine. Yet here I sat, powerless to erase the pain already carved into her life. Guilt twisted sharper than ever. How many times had my world indirectly fed the injustices that kept families like hers on the edge? The neighborhoods where desperation thrived because protection money flowed upward. The corners where low-wage jobs barely sustained life. Remorse gnawed relentlessly, blending with the explosive affection until I felt off balance, as if the plane's cabin had tilted beneath me. A flight attendant approached cautiously down the aisle, her professional smile faltering when she saw me there. She recognized the shift in dynamics, the way passengers now avoided looking in our direction, the subtle presence of Victor nearby. "Sir, ma'am, is everything all right?" Aisha flinched at the question, her body tensing again, fear flashing that she might be blamed, moved, separated from her children. Her voice emerged soft, timid, respectful. "Yes, thank you. She's sleeping now." The attendant nodded uncertainly, glancing at me for confirmation. I met her eyes with the quiet authority that made people step aside without question. She retreated quickly. Aisha exhaled shakily, her gaze dropping to her lap. Curiosity won over fear for a moment. She looked up at me through damp lashes. How did you do that? The song, the patch." I kept my voice low, steady, though inside the emotional rupture threatened to spill over. "It's an old Korean remedy, ginseng for fever. My mother used it on me when I was small. And the song, HORRIFYINGLY. It's about endurance, about carrying on through hardship." Her eyes searched my face, confusion deepening into something more vulnerable. Endurance, she knew it intimately, had lived it every day. The word hung between us, a bridge across the chasm of our lives. Shock rippled through her again. She pressed a hand to her chest as if to steady her heart, dizziness returning as the reality settled. A powerful stranger had intervened, not with demands, but with tenderness. "Why?" she whispered finally, the question raw, pleading. "You don't know us. You could have stayed up front." The honesty in her voice undid me further. I wanted to tell her everything, that seeing her fight alone had shattered me, that the love I felt was already a fire I could not contain. Instead, I offered truth wrapped in restraint. "Because I know what it's like to feel the world is too heavy," I said, "and because your children deserve better than suffering in silence." Tears welled anew in her eyes. She turned her face away, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The release of months, perhaps years, of carrying everything alone. The humiliation of her poverty, laid bare in this public space, warred with the overwhelming relief of unexpected protection. Emotional numbness gave way to pain, sharp and tearing. Min Jae watched us both, his small face solemn. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a smooth worry stone I had given him for flights, a piece of polished jade. Without a word, he extended it across the aisle to Jamal, who had woken again. The boy took it hesitantly, turning it over in his tiny hands. A quiet moment of tenderness amid the chaos. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, the first hints of city lights glittering below like scattered diamonds, I knew I could not let this end here. The contrast between my life and hers had never been starker. My compounded estate waiting with staff and security, her uncertain return to whatever fragile shelter held her family together. The inner conflict raged. Remorse for the world I had helped shape, burning love that demanded I rewrite her story. I slipped a discreet card from my jacket, plain black, embossed with only a private phone number, and pressed it gently into her free hand. "If the fever returns," I said quietly, "or if you need anything, call, day or night." Her fingers closed around it instinctively, shock widening her eyes once more. Fear, curiosity, a flicker of desperate hope, all warring across her features. She nodded, unable to speak. As the wheels touched down, I stood slowly, the decision already made in my fracturing heart. I would not let her disappear into the city's shadows. Not now, not ever. These captured moments echo the raw tenderness and unexpected compassion that unfolded in that cabin. Strangers reaching across divides in a time of need. The plane taxied to the gate at Los Angeles International Airport, the engines winding down to a low whine as the cabin stirred back to life. Seatbelt signs clicked off, overhead bins opened with a chorus of thuds, and passengers surged into the aisles with the weary impatience of long-haul travelers. I remained seated, unwilling to break the fragile cocoon we had woven in these last hours. Victor stood discreetly nearby, handling my carry-on and Min Jae's small backpack, his eyes scanning the cabin with practiced vigilance. Aisha moved slowly, as if waking from a dream she feared might vanish. She gathered the empty bottle, the crumpled blanket, the plastic bag that held their meager belongings, every motion careful, deliberate, born of a life where nothing could be wasted or lost. Kamaya stirred against her chest but did not wake. The fever had broken enough for sleep to claim her fully. Jamal rubbed his eyes, clutching the jade worry stone Min Jae had given him, his small face etched with the confusion of a child who had witnessed something beyond his understanding. I rose only when the aisle cleared enough to allow passage. Aisha stood as well, swaying slightly from exhaustion and the emotional whiplash of the night. Dizziness flickered across her features again. She gripped the seat back for balance, her breath shallow. The contrast struck me anew. My world of private drivers waiting beyond customs, hers of crowded shuttles or long bus rides home to whatever cramped apartment awaited. The injustice of it fed the remorse already gnawing at my insides, blending with the passionate love that now dominated every thought. She looked up at me then, her dark eyes swimming with unshed tears and a cautious curiosity that warred with lingering fear. Her voice emerged soft, restrained, timid, the tone of someone addressing a figure far above her station. "Thank you, sir, for everything. I don't know how to repay." The words fractured something deeper inside me. Repay, as if kindness could be transactional in her world, where every favor carried interest. The humiliation in her posture, the bowed head, the averted gaze, tore at me with violent intensity. I wanted to lift her chin, to tell her she owed nothing, that I would give her the world if she allowed it. Instead, I kept my voice low, steady, though the inner turmoil threatened to spill over. "There is no debt," I said quietly. "Only a father who understands." Her breath caught. Shock widened her eyes, followed by deep confusion, as if such words from a man like me were impossible. Emotional numbness gave way to pain. A single tear escaped, and she brushed it away quickly, embarrassed. The surge of affection in my chest was overwhelming, burning fiercer than before. I wanted to protect her from every cold wind that had ever cut through thin walls, every sleepless night spent counting coins for formula. Min Jae tugged gently at my sleeve, his way of signaling readiness without words. I nodded to him, then turned back to Aisha. The card I had given her was clutched tightly in her hand, knuckles pale. "If anything changes, if the fever returns, or if you need help, call, please." She nodded, the motion small and hesitant. Curiosity flickered again, heightened now by the sincerity in my tone. Why would you?" The question hung unfinished, raw with the weight of her life. Why would a stranger of obvious wealth and power extend himself this far? Dread and unease shadowed her features, fear that this was too good, too unreal. Before I could answer, a flight attendant approached with forced brightness. "Ma'am, we'll need to deplane soon. Do you need assistance with your children?" Aisha tensed immediately, powerless against the implication that she might not manage alone. Her voice dropped even softer. "No, thank you. I'll be fine." But she wasn't fine. I saw the tremor in her arms from holding Kamaya so long, the way Jamal clung to her leg, exhausted and overwhelmed. I stepped forward instinctively. "I'll help," I said to the attendant, my tone leaving no room for argument. She backed away with a quick nod. Aisha's eyes met mine again, shock, disorientation, a flicker of desperate gratitude. She did not protest as I lifted the plastic bag from her feet, as Victor took position to clear our path. We moved slowly down the jet bridge together, me carrying their belongings, Min Jae walking beside Jamal holding his hand in silent solidarity, Aisha cradling Kamaya close. At customs, the line snaked long and tedious. I guided them to the priority lane reserved for first class, my influence subtle but absolute. Officials waved us through with deferential glances. Aisha's confusion deepened into near panic. She whispered apologies for slowing us down, her voice trembling with the fear of overstepping. Outside, in the cool October morning air of Los Angeles, still October 2025, the contrast sharpened unbearably. My black SUV waited curbside, driver at attention. Aisha's reality waited beyond, a long bus ride, perhaps a walk through unsafe streets to a home where heat was uncertain and food scarce. I could not let it end here. Victor opened the rear door. I turned to her. "Let us drive you home. It's no trouble." Her face crumpled, fear, suspicion, the overwhelming rupture of receiving help without strings. Dizziness returned. She swayed, gripping Jamal's hand tighter. I couldn't. We don't want to impose." "It's not an imposition," I said gently. "It's safety, for the children." The mention of her children broke her last resistance. Tears spilled freely now. She nodded, numb, as I helped her into the vehicle. Kamaya still asleep. Jamal wide-eyed at the leather seats and tinted windows. As we pulled away from the curb, the city awakening around us, I sat across from her, the love in my heart a living flame. Guilt and remorse warred with it. The knowledge that my world had helped create the hardship she endured. Yet in this quiet, condensed moment of tenderness, the children safe, Aisha's exhaustion finally easing into guarded relief, I felt the first threads of connection solidify. She looked at me across the space between seats, curiosity winning over fear for the first time. "Who are you?" she whispered. I met her gaze, the inner storm raging but my voice calm. Someone who couldn't look away. The SUV glided through the early morning streets of Los Angeles, the city still wrapped in the quiet haze of dawn. October 2025 had brought cooler air, a hint of fall cutting through the usual warmth, but inside the vehicle it felt suspended in time. Aisha sat across from me, Kamaya asleep in her arms, Jamal curled against her side, with the jade stone clutched in his small fist. Min Jae watched out the tinted window, tracing patterns in the passing lights with his finger on the glass. Victor drove in silence, navigating toward the address Aisha had whispered, Inglewood, a neighborhood where my influence ran deep, but where safety was never guaranteed. I could not take my eyes off her. The exhaustion in her posture was profound. Shoulders slumped under the weight of years, not just hours. Her hoodie hung loose on a frame thinned by too many skipped meals, her face ashen beneath the beauty that still shone through like light through cracked glass. The poverty was etched into every line. Sleepless nights pacing cold floors, cold winds seeping through poorly sealed windows. The constant, humiliating math of deciding which bill to pay and which child to feed first. My heart twisted with violent remorse. My empire touched these streets, protection rackets that raised rents, supply chains that flooded corners with desperation. I had justified it as business, as survival in a ruthless city, but seeing it embodied in her, in the mother who had nearly broken on a plane, ignited a gnawing guilt that threatened to consume me. And beneath the remorse, the love burned hotter, more ferocious with every mile. It was no longer a surge, it was the core of me now, passionate and absolute, demanding I rewrite the cruel fate that had brought her to this edge. The inner turmoil raged. A man of immense wealth, compounds behind gates, fleets of vehicles, men who obeyed without question, yet powerless against the systemic cruelty that had crushed her spirit. I gripped the armrest discreetly, steadying myself against the emotional rupture. Aisha's voice broke the silence, soft and timid. You can drop us at the corner if it's easier. I don't want to trouble you further." The words pierced me. Trouble. As if carrying her home was an inconvenience rather than the only thing that mattered in this moment. Fear lingered in her tone. Fear of imposing, of owing, of the strings that usually came attached. "It's no trouble," I said quietly. "I want to see you safely inside." Her eyes met mine briefly, confusion and shock flickering before she looked away. Dizziness seemed to wash over her again. She pressed a hand to her temple, breath shallow. The offer of safety, from a stranger, from someone like me, was disorienting, tearing at the walls she had built to survive. We turned into her neighborhood as the sun rose fully, casting long shadows over cracked sidewalks and faded apartment buildings. The contrast struck like a blow. My Bel Air estate waiting with manicured grounds and armed patrols, her reality of barred windows and overflowing dumpsters. Victor slowed as we approached the address, a rundown complex with peeling paint and laundry hanging from balconies. But something was wrong. A group of men loitered near the entrance, 3, maybe 4, hoods up, postures aggressive. I recognized the colors immediately. A rival faction pushing into territory I controlled. Tension rippled through me. They were collecting, or worse, marking presence. Victor's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. He saw it too. Aisha tensed, dread flooding her features. "That's my building. They weren't there yesterday." Her voice trembled with powerless fear. These men, enforcers for a crew that preyed on the vulnerable, likely knew who lived where, who owed rent or favors. The irrational injustice of it burned through me. A mother returning with sick children, already crushed by life, now facing intimidation at her own door. "Stay here," I told Victor low. He nodded, hand moving discreetly to his side. I stepped out first, my presence drawing immediate attention. The men straightened, recognition dawning. One of them knew my face, whispered my name. The air thickened with suspense. "This building's under new management?" one challenged, bold but uncertain. I met his gaze with the cold authority that had built my empire. Not anymore. The standoff lasted seconds, but felt eternal. No weapons drawn, just the weight of reputation, the unspoken threat of consequences. They backed down, muttering, dispersing into the morning light. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the violent inner conflict, the remorse that my world bred this danger, the fierce love demanding I shield her from it forever. Aisha emerged slowly, eyes wide with shock and deep confusion. How did you?" I offered no explanation, only my arm to steady her as she carried Kamaya up the stairs. The apartment was small, sparse, a single room with a kitchenette, mattresses on the floor, a refrigerator humming weakly. The heartbreak of it, children raised in such deprivation, tore at me. Cold winds had indeed found their way in. A draft whistled through a cracked window patched with tape. She set Kamaya down gently on a thin blanket, Jamal curling beside his sister. Exhaustion finally claimed Aisha. She sank onto the edge of the mattress, head in hands. Tears came silently, the emotional numbness giving way to raw pain. I knelt before her, the power I wielded meaningless in this moment of tenderness. The fever may return. Rest. I'll have a doctor come. Her head snapped up, fear and curiosity warring. I can't afford. It's taken care of. Shock rippled through her. Dizziness returned, and she gripped the mattress edge. The overwhelming rupture of protection from someone so powerful left her trembling. Why are you doing this? She whispered again, voice breaking. Because I love you, I thought, the words burning unspoken. Instead, because you shouldn't have to do this alone. Days blurred into a crisis I orchestrated from the shadows. The doctor, a trusted Korean-American pediatrician on my payroll, arrived within hours, diagnosing pneumonia in Kamaya, prescribing medication I covered anonymously. Bills began arriving at my office instead of hers. Groceries appeared at her door, fresh fruit, formula, warm clothes for the children. Aisha texted the number once, timidly. Is this you? My reply, yes, let me help. Her responses were cautious, grateful but fearful, dread that it would end, unease at the scale. The poverty's humiliation deepened with each delivery. She who had gone hungry to feed her children, now receiving without earning. Yet curiosity grew, text lengthening, questions tentative. But the rivals did not forget the morning's humiliation. A week later, as Aisha walked Jamal home from preschool, Kamaya recovering slowly, a car slowed beside them. Words shouted, threats veiled but clear. Move or pay. She hurried inside, heart pounding, texting me in panic. I arrived within minutes, Victor and 2 others behind me. The car circled again, bold, testing. I stepped into the street, phone to ear coordinating response. The driver saw me, recognized the escalation he invited, and sped away. No violence, just the weight of consequence hanging heavy. Aisha watched from the window, face pale with shock and disorienting gratitude. When I entered, she stood trembling. They'll come back, not while I'm here. The words carried more than protection. They carried the passionate love now anchoring every decision. Her eyes searched mine, confusion giving way to something fragile. Trust, perhaps the beginnings of feeling seen. That night, as cold winds rattled her windows again, I sat outside in the SUV, guarding. Remorse and love warred violently within. Guilt for the dangers my world brought close, burning need to pull her into safety forever. The crisis had escalated, but so had the connection, quiet moments of tenderness amid the chaos, drawing us inexorably closer. 2 weeks had passed since the morning I first drove Aisha home, 2 weeks in which the crisis around her had not subsided, but deepened in ways I could never have foreseen. Kamaya's pneumonia lingered, requiring follow-up visits and medication that, without my intervention, would have buried Aisha in debt she could never repay. The rivals continued their pressure. Notes slipped under her door, cars idling too long outside the building, whispered threats in the laundry room. Each incident reported to me in trembling texts. They're back, ignited fresh violence in my chest, remorse and love twisting tighter until I could barely breathe through the storm. I had escalated protection without her full knowledge. Unmarked vehicles rotating shifts, men blending into the neighborhood. But it was not enough. Not for her safety, and certainly not for the burning need inside me to pull her out of that cold, crumbling apartment entirely. On a crisp October afternoon, still October 2025, I sent a message I had agonized over for days. Come to the house this evening. Bring the children. I would like you to meet Min Jae properly, away from airplanes and hospitals. Dinner will be simple. No obligations. The reply came after an hour that felt like years. Are you sure? We don't want to impose. The humility in her words nearly undid me. Impose. As if entering my world was a burden rather than the desperate wish of my fracturing heart. I sent the car anyway. When they arrived at the gates of my Bel Air estate, the contrast struck like a physical blow. The SUV pulled through wrought iron barriers flanked by discreet security, up a winding drive lined with ancient oaks and manicured gardens that bloomed defiantly against the season. The house itself rose at the end, clean lines of stone and glass, expansive yet fortress-like, windows reflecting the late sun like polished shields. Armed men patrolled the perimeter with casual precision, visible enough to deter, invisible enough to preserve the illusion of normalcy. Aisha stepped out slowly, Kamaya on her hip, Jamal clinging to her leg. Her eyes widened in shock, then deep disorientation, the kind that stole balance and breath. She swayed slightly, gripping the car door as dizziness washed over her. This was not a home. It was a compound, a world removed from cracked sidewalks and eviction fears. The humiliation of her own circumstances flooded back. The thin walls that let in cold winds, the refrigerator too often empty, the night she had gone without so her children could eat. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away, cautious and fearful that she had misunderstood, that this invitation was a mistake. Jamal stared openly, mouth agape. Kamaya, feeling her mother's tension, began to fuss. I waited on the steps, Min Jae beside me in a simple sweater and jeans, my attempt at informality. Victor stood back, giving space. I descended slowly, careful not to crowd her. "Welcome," I said softly. Aisha's voice emerged timid, restrained. "Mr. Kang, this is, I didn't expect." She trailed off, confusion deepening into pain as the gap between our lives yawned wider. "Alexander," I corrected gently. "Please." She nodded, but did not repeat it. Too overwhelming, perhaps. Fear flickered. What did a man like me want with a woman like her? Curiosity followed close behind, heightened by the gentleness in my tone. I led them inside. The entrance hall soared 2 stories, marble floors echoing softly underfoot, modern art on the walls, stark pieces worth more than Aisha could earn in years. Yet the space felt impersonal, museum-like, lacking the warmth of family photos or children's drawings. Aisha noticed, her gaze lingering on empty surfaces. The heartbreak of it mirrored her own losses. No pictures of better times, no evidence of shared joy. We moved to the library, a room I favored, floor-to-ceiling books in Korean and English, leather chairs arranged around a fireplace already lit against the evening chill. Min Jae had prepared a low table with colored paper, crayons, and a selection of picture books he thought Jamal might like. He stood quietly, hands clasped, waiting. Aisha set Kamaya down on a soft rug, watching as the little girl toddled toward the books. Jamal approached Min Jae cautiously, drawn by the boy's calm presence. "Min Jae has been looking forward to this," I said. "He wanted to show Jamal his books." Aisha's eyes softened, gratitude and shock mingling. That's kind of him." The children connected slowly, Jamal shy at first, then bolder as Min Jae pointed out illustrations without demanding response. Kamaya babbled, offering a crayon to Min Jae, who accepted it with solemn care. A quiet tenderness filled the room, condensed and profound. I watched Aisha watch them, and the love inside me reached a new, tearing intensity. Her face, still thin, still marked by exhaustion, lit with something I had not seen on the plane: hope, fragile and disbelieving. But beneath it, pain lingered. The knowledge that this was temporary, that tomorrow she would return to cold winds and empty cupboards. Dinner was served in the conservatory, simple Korean dishes alongside American comfort food: bibimbap, fried chicken, rice, steamed vegetables. Staff moved discreetly, but Aisha tensed at their presence, unused to service, fearful of judgment. She ate little, too overwhelmed. After the children were settled in the playroom with a trusted nanny, I led Aisha to the garden terrace. The city lights spread below us like a carpet of stars, the air cool but scented with jasmine. She stood at the railing, arms wrapped around herself. "This place, it's beautiful, but I don't belong here." The words were soft, self-effacing, laced with the humiliation of poverty. Tears threatened again. I stepped closer, not touching, but near enough for her to feel the warmth. "You belong wherever you choose," I said, "and I want you here." Shock rippled through her. She turned, eyes searching mine. "Why? You've already done so much. The doctor, the food, keeping those men away. I can't ever repay." "There is nothing to repay." My voice roughened with emotion. "I see how hard you fight for them, how alone you've been. Min Jae, he struggles too. The world doesn't always see him clearly." I thought, perhaps time here, with someone who understands struggle, could help him. And help you. The offer hung between us. Evenings spent here, compensation that would erase her debts, the children safe and fed. I framed it carefully, help for Min Jae, not charity for her. Her breath caught. Confusion, fear, then a surge of desperate curiosity. Dizziness returned. She gripped the railing. The idea of relief, of not returning to cold nights and threats, was too vast, too disorienting. "How much?" she whispered finally, voice trembling. I named a figure, $25,000 monthly, watching as shock widened her eyes into near panic. Emotional rupture followed. Tears spilled freely, shoulders shaking with the weight of sudden possibility. "I can't. That's too much." "It's not," I said fiercely. "Your time, your presence, it's worth far more to me." She stared at me. The passionate love I felt reflected back in fragments: gratitude, awe, the beginnings of trust. The inner turmoil in me peaked, remorse that my world had contributed to her suffering, burning need to make it right. In the quiet that followed, with the children's laughter drifting from inside, the invitation became something more. the first step toward pulling her from the edge, toward the life I desperately wanted to build around her. She nodded at last, barely audible. I'll think about it. But in her eyes, I saw the decision already forming, and in my heart, the love burned brighter than ever. Aisha's answer came 3 days later in a text sent at 2 in the morning, time-stamped proof that sleep still eluded her, that cold winds and worry kept her pacing the thin carpet of her apartment. "I'll accept. For the children. Thank you, Mr. Kang. Alexander." The words were simple, careful, but they struck me like a thunderclap. Relief flooded through me, fierce and immediate, followed instantly by a deeper wave of remorse. She was accepting because she had no real choice, because the world had backed her into a corner where survival meant stepping into the orbit of a man like me. The passionate love that had become my anchor now burned with fresh intensity, laced with guilt that I was the reason her life had become this precarious. My wealth could lift her out of poverty, yes, but it was also the shadow that had helped create the poverty in the first place. The inner conflict raged harder than ever, a violent tension that left me standing on the terrace long after reading her message, staring at the city lights while my chest ached with contradictory longing. To protect her, to possess her safety, to atone for every injustice I had ever allowed. We began the following week. 3 evenings, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, from 4 until 8. The car would collect them from Inglewood, bring them to Bel Air, and return them home. Simple parameters, meant to feel like employment rather than rescue. But from the first afternoon, the boundaries blurred. I opened the door myself, no staff in sight, no Victor looming. Just me, in a plain shirt with sleeves rolled up, trying to look less like the man who commanded fear in back rooms, and more like a father hoping for connection. Aisha stood on the steps, Kamaya on her hip, Jamal clutching her hand. The late October light caught the exhaustion still etched around her eyes, but there was something new as well, cautious hope, fragile as frost. She had dressed carefully, her best jeans, a clean sweater that still hung loose on her thinned frame. The children wore new coats I had sent anonymously. She had not protested, perhaps understanding refusal would wound pride more than acceptance. "Come in," I said softly. She stepped over the threshold, breath catching at the expanse of the entry hall. Shock flickered again, dizziness, a slight sway as the scale of the house pressed against her sense of place. She gripped Jamal's hand tighter, steadying herself. "It's even bigger in daylight," she whispered, voice timid, respectful. Min Jae waited in the library, seated cross-legged on the rug with a carefully arranged selection of wooden blocks and picture books about animals and space. He looked up when they entered, his face solemn but brightening in the small way I had learned to recognize, eyes a fraction wider, fingers stilling their usual fidget. Jamal hesitated at the doorway, overwhelmed. Kamaya reached out from Aisha's arms toward the colorful blocks. Aisha set her down gently, kneeling beside her. "It's okay, baby, we're guests here." The word guests carried layers of meaning, temporary, careful, not belonging. It pierced me. Min Jae moved first, slow, deliberate, pushing a red block toward Kamaya. She babbled and grabbed it, banging it happily on the rug. Jamal watched, then edged closer, sitting opposite Min Jae. My son offered him a blue block without words. Jamal took it, turning it over in his hands, and within minutes, they were building a careful tower together. Min Jae precise, Jamal enthusiastic. Kamaya crawled between them, knocking sections down and laughing when they rebuilt. Aisha watched from the edge of the rug, tears gathering but not falling. The sight of her children safe, warm, engaged with another child who accepted them without demand, it was more than she had dared hope for in months. Emotional rupture showed in the tremor of her lips, the way she pressed a hand to her mouth. I sat on the floor nearby, close enough to be present, far enough to give space. "They're good together," I said quietly. She nodded, voice thick. "Jamal doesn't have many friends, kids at preschool. They sense he's different. Poor clothes, no snacks to share." She stopped, embarrassed at revealing so much. The confession fed my remorse. Poor clothes, no snacks. Because rent and medicine came first. I swallowed the surge of anger, at the system, at myself, and focused on the tenderness unfolding before us. Over the weeks, the evening settled into a rhythm that felt almost sacred. Monday, structured play, puzzles, sensory tables with rice or water beads that soothed Min Jae's need for predictable texture. Aisha's natural patience drew him out. She never rushed, never raised her voice. She spoke to him softly, respectfully, the way she spoke to me, as if his differences were simply part of who he was, not something to fix. Wednesday, music and movement in the conservatory. I played soft pansori recordings or American lullabies on the sound system. Aisha swayed with Kamaya in her arms, encouraging Jamal to clap rhythms. Min Jae rocked gently to the beat, occasionally humming notes with perfect pitch. I watched from the doorway, heart tearing open at the sight. Aisha's thin frame moving with a grace born of survival, her face softening as fear receded. Friday, reading and quiet time. Aisha read picture books to all 3 children, her voice warm, expressive. Min Jae sat beside her now, not across the room. Jamal leaned against her other side. Kamaya often fell asleep in her lap. I joined them sometimes, reading in Korean when Min Jae requested it, translating softly for the others. With each visit, Aisha changed. The emaciation eased, cheeks filling slightly from regular meals. The hollows beneath her eyes lightened from unbroken sleep in a warm house. But more profound was the shift inside. Suspicion giving way to cautious trust, fear to curiosity, powerlessness to the first stirrings of agency. She began asking questions, quiet, respectful, about Min Jae's routines, his favorite textures, his triggers. She offered observations with growing confidence. He likes when the lights are dimmer in here, or Jamal calms when we count together. I listened as if her words were scripture. One Friday, toward the end of October, rain lashed the windows, a rare Los Angeles storm. The children were asleep in the guest room we had quietly prepared. Aisha and I sat in the library, fire crackling, the room lit only by flames and one lamp. She held a mug of tea, hands wrapped around it for warmth she no longer needed but still sought instinctively. "I got the eviction notice reversed," she said softly. "Landlord said the back rent was paid. Was that?" I nodded once. Tears filled her eyes instantly, shock, then overwhelming rupture. "I can't ever thank you enough." "You don't have to." She looked at me fully then, curiosity heightened, fear almost gone. "You're not what I expected. People with all this, they don't usually—" The sentence trailed off. I finished it in my mind. "They don't usually care about people like us." The love inside me crested, passionate and painful. I wanted to tell her everything, how she had become my center, how the remorse and longing warred nightly, how I lay awake imagining her safe forever within these walls. Instead, I offered truth in pieces. "I know what it's like to lose everything," I said, "and to fight alone. Seeing you do it, with such strength, it changed something in me." Her breath caught. Disorientation flickered, dizziness as the ground shifted again. A man of my power confessing vulnerability. The emotional peak was sharp. Tears spilled, shoulders shaking with the chaos of gratitude and confusion and the first tentative bloom of returned feeling. Outside, rivals tested boundaries again. Cars circling her old building, messages left. I handled them quietly. A late-night meeting in a Koreatown warehouse, words exchanged, lines redrawn. No violence, only the unmistakable promise of it. Danger receded, for now. But inside these walls, in the quiet evenings, an early bond formed. Fragile, profound, irreversible. The children bridged us first, Jamal calling Min Jae friend, Kamaya reaching for me as often as for Aisha. And slowly, inevitably, Aisha reached too, not with touch, but with trust. The acceptance had become something far deeper, and the love anchoring my heart now anchored hers as well, whether she yet knew it or not. The evenings had become the only hours when the storm inside me quieted. By mid-October 2025, the routine felt almost natural. The car arriving at 4, the children spilling out with growing excitement. Aisha stepping onto the drive with a tentative smile that grew steadier each time. Kamaya now reached for me as soon as the door opened, arms outstretched, babbling "Ada" in her garbled way. Jamal ran straight to Minjay, pulling treasures from his pockets, leaves, smooth stones, once a feather, to share. Minjay accepted them with solemn gratitude, arranging them on his shelf like museum pieces. Aisha watched it all with eyes that had begun to shine again. The sharp edges of hunger had softened, her cheeks held faint color, her sweater no longer hung like a tent. She moved with less wariness, spoke with less apology. She even laughed sometimes, a low, surprised sound when Kamaya knocked over Minjay's careful block tower, and he rebuilt it without protest, simply to see her clap. I lived for those moments. But the love that anchored me had become a double-edged blade. Every glimpse of her healing intensified the remorse. I had the power to end her suffering in a single decision, yet I held back, afraid that too much too soon would frighten her away. The inner turmoil grew daily, violent, tearing. Nights found me pacing the terrace, guilt and longing warring until my chest ached. I had built walls of wealth and fear around myself after losing my wife, convinced no one could breach them. Yet Aisha had slipped through without effort, simply by being who she was, fierce, exhausted, unbreakable. Then came the evening that changed everything. It was a Wednesday, rain tapping softly against the conservatory glass. The children were in the playroom, Jamal and Minjay constructing an elaborate marble run, Kamaya napping on a thick blanket nearby. Aisha and I sat at the low table with tea, a quiet companionship we had fallen into. She had been quieter than usual, movements careful, face pale beneath the warmth the house provided. She set her cup down with trembling fingers. "Alexander." My name still emerged hesitant, as if tasting something forbidden. "I need to tell you something." The tone, soft, restrained, laced with dread, sent ice through me. I braced for refusal, for her to say the arrangement was too much, that she could not continue. She took a breath, eyes fixed on the table. "I'm pregnant." The words landed like a detonation. Silence stretched, thick and disorienting. Shock widened my eyes, the room seemed to tilt. Pregnant. Another child, hers and some absent man's, growing inside her even as she fought to feed the two she already had. The injustice of it crashed over me. A woman who had gone hungry to keep her children alive, now facing the terror of another mouth, another set of needs, in a life that already teetered on collapse. Aisha misinterpreted my silence. Fear flooded her features. She curled inward, arms wrapping protectively around her middle. "I just found out." 10 weeks. The father, he left again when I told him. I wasn't going to say anything, but "I can't keep coming here if it changes things. I understand if you want me to stop." Her voice cracked on the last word. Tears spilled, shoulders shaking with the emotional rupture I knew too well. The crushing weight of unfair fate, the humiliation of admitting weakness to someone whose life held no such precarity. Dizziness washed over her. She pressed a hand to her forehead, breath shallow. The pregnancy had already stolen color and strength, she who had so little to spare. Inside me, the storm reached catastrophic force. Remorse exploded first. How many women like her had my world indirectly harmed? Jobs lost to protection rackets, neighborhoods destabilized, medical care out of reach. Then came the passionate love, fiercer than ever, now laced with protective fury. This child, hers, not mine, yet already part of her, was now part of the circle I would defend with my life. The thought of her facing this alone, returning to cold winds and empty cupboards while carrying new life, was unbearable. I moved without thinking, kneeling before her chair, not touching, but close enough for her to feel the intensity radiating from me. "Nothing changes," I said, voice rough with emotion. "Except that you, and this child, are under my protection too. The job stands, the support stands, everything stands." Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock and deep confusion. "But It's not your responsibility. You don't even know me, not really. I know enough. The words emerged fierce, almost desperate. I know you fight for your children with everything you have. I know you deserve better than fear and hunger. Let me give you that. Tears streamed freely now. She swayed, emotional numbness giving way to raw, tearing pain. The overwhelming rupture of receiving unconditional protection when every experience had taught her the opposite. Her hand moved instinctively to her still flat abdomen, protective and terrified. "I'm scared," she whispered, voice breaking. "I don't know how to do this again. Alone." "You're not alone." The declaration hung between us, heavy with meaning I could not yet voice fully. The love I felt surged, passionate and absolute, now encompassing the life she carried. Guilt twisted alongside it, the knowledge that my world's dangers could one day touch this new child too. The inner conflict was violent, numbing, powerless to erase her past suffering, yet determined to end it forever. She searched my face, curiosity heightened through tears. "Why would you?" "Because I love you," the thought roared silently. "Because you have become the center of everything." Instead, I offered what I could. Because no child, born or unborn, should begin life in fear. And because I can. In the days that followed, the twist reshaped everything. Aisha's visits continued, but with new tenderness. She rested more, ate without apology. I arranged discreet prenatal care, the best obstetrician in Los Angeles. Visits scheduled around our evenings. Supplements, comfortable clothes, anything she needed appeared without request. The rivals sensed vulnerability, rumors of my distractions spreading. One evening, as the car returned Aisha and the children to Inglewood, a vehicle followed too closely. Victor handled it with a sharp maneuver and a warning call, but the message was clear. Weakness invites challenge. I responded the next night, a tense meeting on neutral ground in Koreatown. Words only, but weighted with promise. Lines were redrawn, peace bought, for now. Aisha noticed the strain in my eyes. One quiet Friday, children asleep, she reached across the space between our chairs and touched my hand. Brief, hesitant, the first voluntary contact. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not turning away." The touch seared me. The hidden pregnancy had not distanced us, it had bound us tighter. Her fear eased into cautious trust, mine into fiercer resolve. The early bond deepened into something unbreakable, and the love anchoring my fractured heart now held 4 lives instead of 1. Hers, Jamal's, Kamaya's, and the child still growing. I would protect them all, whatever the cost. The revelation of Aisha's pregnancy had shifted the ground beneath us, but it was not until a rainy Monday evening in late October 2025 that the second fracture opened, one that reached into the deepest vault of my soul. The children had been unusually restless that day. Min-jae, sensing the storm outside, had struggled with transitions. The marble run refused to work as planned. Jamal's enthusiastic additions kept toppling the structure, and Kamaya, teething on top of her recovering strength, had cried in frustrated bursts. Aisha, now visibly weary from the early demands of pregnancy, moved between them with infinite patience. But I saw the toll. The way she pressed a hand to her lower back, the faint nausea that paled her face when she thought no one watched. By 7 o'clock, exhaustion claimed them all. Jamal and Kamaya fell asleep on the thick rug, limbs tangled like puppies. Min-jae fought it longer, rocking gently in the corner with his worry stone, until his eyes finally closed mid-motion. Aisha covered them with blankets, her movements tender, maternal, protective. I watched from the doorway, the love inside me, a living flame, fierce, passionate, now encompassing the unborn child as fiercely as the 3 breathing softly before us. She straightened slowly, one hand resting on her abdomen without thinking. Our eyes met across the dim room. Gratitude shone in hers, but beneath it lingered the old shadows. Fear of the future, the lingering humiliation of needing help, the disorientation of safety after so long without it. I gestured toward the hallway. "Let them sleep. Come sit with me." She followed quietly into the adjoining study, a smaller room I favored on difficult nights, with dark wood shelves, a single lamp, and windows looking out over rain-slick gardens. The fire was low, casting flickering gold across her face as she sank into the armchair opposite mine. For a long moment, we simply listened to the rain, the silence companionable yet charged. Then Min Jae's voice drifted from the playroom, a sharp, distressed cry. Not the usual protest at a disrupted routine, but something rawer, deeper, a nightmare. I was on my feet instantly. Aisha rose too, but I reached the doorway first. Min Jae sat upright on the rug, eyes wide and unseeing, rocking hard, hands pressed to his ears. "No, no, the car, loud, mommy." The words were fragmented, but they struck me like bullets. Mommy. He had not spoken of her, of the wife I lost, in years. Not since he was too young to form full memories. Yet here it was, surfacing in nightmare. The night 6 years ago when a rival's bomb meant for me took her and our infant daughter instead. The explosion that left Min Jae with lifelong sensitivities to loud sounds, to chaos, to loss he could not name. I knelt before him, voice steady despite the violent rupture inside my chest. "It's okay, son. You're safe. Daddy's here." He rocked harder, tears streaming. The fire, the loud, gone. Aisha hovered in the doorway, confusion and concern warring on her face. She did not know the story, only that Min Jae's mother was absent. But maternal instinct overrode caution. She knelt beside me, speaking softly. "We're all here, sweetheart. Listen to the rain. It's gentle." Slowly, painfully, Min Jae's rocking eased. His breathing slowed. He leaned into me, exhausted, and within minutes, slept again. This time, deeply, safely. But I could not rise. The buried grief I had locked away for years cracked open, raw and bleeding. Guilt, old, corrosive, unrelenting, flooded through the breach. I had built my empire harder after that night, more ruthless, telling myself it was to protect what remained. But the truth was uglier. Vengeance masked as provision, power as penance. And now, with Aisha and her children filling the house with life I had thought lost forever, the remorse became unbearable. I stayed on my knees long after Min Jae's breathing evened, forehead pressed to his small shoulder, tears I had not allowed in years burning silent tracks down my face. Aisha's hand settled lightly on my back, hesitant, then firmer. Comfort from her, when I was the one who should comfort. When I finally looked up, her eyes swam with tears of her own. Shock, deep empathy, the emotional rupture of witnessing a man she had seen as unbreakable, now broken. "What happened?" she whispered, voice soft, respectful, aching. "The dam broke," I told her. The words came haltingly at first, then in a rush I could not stem. The rivalry that escalated beyond control, the bomb meant for me, the car carrying my wife and 2-year-old daughter home from a rare outing, the explosion that took them both instantly. Min Jae, safe with a nanny, left with invisible scars that shaped his every day. My descent into colder calculation afterward, the empire hardened into something darker. I spoke of the guilt that never left, that my choices had killed the people I loved most, that I had failed them, that every night since I had lain awake reliving the moment I learned they were gone. Aisha listened without interruption, tears streaming freely. When I finished, voice hoarse, she moved closer, kneeling fully now, her hand sliding from my back to my arm. The touch was tentative, then steady. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. No one should carry that alone." The comfort offered by her, the woman who had known only abandonment and struggle, shattered what remained of my walls. Shock coursed through me. Dizziness, the sense that the floor had vanished. Emotional numbness gave way to tearing pain, years of isolation collapsing under the weight of shared grief. She understood loss in her own way. Fathers absent, dreams deferred, children raised in deprivation. Our sorrows were different in scale but identical in depth, the cruel, irrational theft of safety from those who deserved it most. In that moment, on the playroom floor surrounded by sleeping children, something irreversible shifted. The passionate love I had carried alone became mutual territory. Her hand tightened on my arm, mine covered it without thinking. We stayed like that, foreheads nearly touching, breathing the same air thick with rain and revelation. Later, when the children remained asleep and we moved back to the study, the intimacy lingered. She sat closer, no space between chairs now. I poured tea with shaking hands. She took the cup, her fingers brushing mine. "You've carried this for 6 years," she said softly, "and still built all this for him." I nodded, throat tight. "That's strength," she continued, voice trembling with sincerity, "not weakness." The words healed something I had thought permanently scarred. Tears threatened again, mine, hers. The emotional peak was profound, violent inner struggle giving way to shared vulnerability, remorse tempered by the first true connection I had felt since loss. Outside, rivals probed again, a car too bold near her old building. I handled it swiftly, a midnight call, a meeting on neutral ground, lines reinforced with quiet menace. Danger receded, but the grief had changed me, made the need to protect her, all of them, even fiercer. In the quiet that followed the confession, our bond deepened beyond employer and companion, beyond rescuer and rescued. It became something raw, honest, healing. The buried grief, finally spoken, no longer buried us. It bound us. The confession of my buried grief did not close the wound. It opened the floodgates. In the days that followed, the house felt different, charged, as if the air itself carried the weight of what had been spoken. Min Jae seemed lighter, the nightmare not repeated, as though voicing the unspeakable had loosened its grip. The children played with the same joy, but Aisha and I moved around each other with a new awareness, glances lingering longer, silences deeper, touches accidental yet electric. I could no longer pretend the love I felt was contained. It had become a force, passionate and consuming, threading through every moment. Remorse still gnawed, relentless, violent, for the dangers my world posed, for the years I had lived armored against feeling. But the grief shared with Aisha had forged something unbreakable. Mutual recognition of loss, of survival, of the fierce need to protect what remained. She felt it too. I saw it in the way her eyes sought mine when the children laughed, in the soft questions about my day, in the way she no longer apologized for taking space in my home. Then came the storm. It was the last Friday in October 2025, rain lashing the windows like thrown gravel. The children had fallen asleep early, exhausted from an afternoon building an elaborate fort out of cushions and blankets. Aisha and I lingered in the conservatory, the glass walls streaked with water, the room lit only by the low glow of sconces and the occasional flash of lightning. She sat on the wide window seat, knees drawn up, a shawl around her shoulders against a chill only she seemed to feel. Pregnancy had begun to show, a gentle curve she rested her hand on unconsciously. I stood nearby, pouring tea I did not drink, watching the storm as if it mirrored the one inside me. Thunder rolled, deep and prolonged. She flinched slightly, old habits from nights when storms meant leaks in the roof, power outages, children waking cold and scared. I moved without decision, sitting beside her on the wide seat, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. The air between us thickened. "You're safe here," I said quietly, "always." She turned to me, eyes dark and searching in the low light. Tears gathered, not falling yet. "I know, because of you." The words were simple, but they carried everything: gratitude, wonder, the slow erosion of fear. Shock flickered across her face at her own boldness, then deeper emotion, vulnerability laid bare. I could not hold back any longer. My hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. I brushed a stray curl from her cheek, fingers lingering against her skin, warm, soft, real. The touch sent fire through me. Her breath caught. Dizziness washed over her features, eyes widening as the ground shifted again. "Alexander." My name emerged as a whisper, timid yet laced with something new, longing. The storm outside peaked. Lightning illuminated the room in stark white, thunder crashing immediately after. She startled fully into my arms, I held her, carefully at first, then closer as she did not resist. Her body trembled against mine, not from cold, but from the overwhelming rupture, years of carrying everything alone, of cold winds and empty nights, suddenly enveloped in protection and desire. Tears came then, soaking my shirt. I tilted her face up gently. Our eyes met, hers filled with shock, confusion, then a surge of returned passion that mirrored my own. The love I had carried in silence became shared space. I kissed her. It was not gentle. It was raw, desperate, years of isolation and grief pouring out. She responded with equal intensity, hands clutching my shirt, body pressing closer as if anchoring herself against the chaos of feeling wanted, chosen, safe. The kiss deepened, electric and consuming, lightning flashing again as if the storm itself approved. When we broke apart, breathing ragged, foreheads resting together, tears streamed down her face. Emotional numbness gave way to tearing pain and joy intertwined. "I've never," she whispered, voice breaking. "No one has ever." The confession undid me. I held her tighter, remorse surging anew, for every man who had abandoned her, for every night she had suffered alone. The passionate love roared, protective and possessive. "You're not alone anymore," I said fiercely. "Not ever." We did not speak of love yet, the word too vast, too soon. But it lived in every touch that followed. Hands intertwined as we watched the storm ease, her head on my shoulder, my arm around her and the curve of her pregnancy. In the weeks after, passion became part of the evenings, stolen, urgent moments when the children slept. Kisses in shadowed hallways, embraces in the study, whispered confessions against skin. Each encounter intensified the bond, her fear melting into trust, my guilt tempered by the healing of being needed, wanted. But the world outside did not pause. Rivals, sensing my growing attachment, tested harder. One evening, as the car brought them home, a vehicle blocked the street near her building. Men stepping out, postures threatening. Victor called me instantly. I arrived within minutes, stepping into the rain-slick street alone. The confrontation was tense, words sharp, promises veiled. "She's under my protection," I said, voice low, absolute. They backed down, but the message was clear. Vulnerability invites attack. I moved her that night. No discussion, only action. The apartment cleared, belongings packed discreetly. Aisha and the children brought permanently to the estate. She protested weakly, fear of overstepping, of losing independence. But the relief in her eyes betrayed her. Safety, finally. In the quiet aftermath, passion flared brighter. One night, storm long gone, we lay in the dim light of my bedroom, the first time she stayed through dawn. Her hand traced the scar on my shoulder, old from a betrayal years ago. "You carry so much," she whispered, "as do you." We made love then, slow, reverent, then urgent again. The emotional peaks were profound. Her tears of release, my silent vows to never let harm touch her. The contrast, her past of deprivation against this abundance of care, heightened every sensation. The inner turmoil did not vanish. Remorse for dangers brought close, guilt for the life I could not fully leave behind. But passion, fierce, shared, became the counterweight. In stolen moments amid children's laughter and warm rooms, we built something new. Not just safety, but desire. Not just protection, but partnership. The ignition had begun, and neither of us wanted to extinguish it. The passion that had ignited between us did not burn quietly. It consumed everything in its path. By early December, though the calendar still read October in the suspended time of our beginning, the days had blurred into a rhythm of closeness that felt eternal. Aisha no longer returned to Inglewood. The estate had become home. Her belongings, few as they were, filled drawers in the guest suite that quickly became hers. The children's laughter echoed through halls once silent. Minjae's routines expanded to include Jamal's chaotic energy and Kamaya's fearless affection. Aisha's pregnancy progressed, the curve of her belly a constant reminder of the life we were building together, even if we had not yet spoken the future aloud. I lived in a state of heightened contradiction, joy so profound it bordered on pain, and remorse that grew sharper with every happiness. The love I felt for her, for all of them, was the anchor that kept my fractured heart from shattering completely. Yet the guilt gnawed relentlessly. My world, the one that had given me power to protect them, was the same world that could destroy them. Every tender moment, her hand in mine as we watched the children play, her head on my shoulder during quiet evenings, the way she whispered my name in the dark, intensified the inner turmoil. I was a man who commanded fear in the streets, yet trembled at the thought of losing her to the consequences of my choices. The betrayal came from the place I least expected, within. It began with small discrepancies, shipments delayed, whispers reaching rivals faster than they should. I dismissed them at first, attributing the leaks to overcaution. But when a routine drop in Koreatown was ambushed, not violently, but precisely enough to cost territory and face, suspicion turned inward. The traitor was Daniel Park, my lieutenant of 15 years, the man I had trusted with Min Jae's safety, with my life. Korean-American like me, raised in the same hard streets, he had risen beside me. I had mentored him, shared meals with his family, considered him closer than blood. His motive emerged in fragments, jealousy, bitter and festering. He believed Aisha and the children had made me weak. That my growing attachment, my distraction with domestic life, threatened the empire we had built. In his mind, she was an outsider, a vulnerability. He fed information to the same syndicate responsible for my wife's death years ago, hoping, perhaps, to force me back to ruthless focus or simply to take my place if I fell. The discovery came on a cold December night. Though time still held us in October's grip, the chill felt real. Victor brought me the proof, encrypted messages, payments traced. I confronted Daniel in the warehouse we used for private matters, the air thick with rain and betrayal. He did not deny it. "You've gone soft," he said, voice laced with contempt. "A woman from the streets, her kids, dragging you down. The men see it, the rivals smell it." The words struck like knives. Rage surged, but beneath it, remorse, violent, tearing. He was not entirely wrong. Love had changed me. But to weaponize it against the people I now lived for, I did not raise a hand. Only my voice, low and final. "You betrayed more than me. You endangered innocence." Security escorted him out, alive but finished. Word spread quickly, betrayal met consequence. The syndicate, sensing internal fracture, grew bolder. The direct attack came days later. Aisha had taken the children to a nearby park, guarded but discreetly, to give them normalcy. Kamaya's laughter on swings, Jamal and Min Jae building leaf piles. A car slowed on the adjacent street, window lowering. Not shots, too public, but a clear message. Photos taken, threats implied. Victor intercepted, blocking the vehicle. I arrived within minutes, stepping into the street as the car idled. The driver, a low-level enforcer from the old rival crew, met my gaze. Recognition dawned. He sped away. No violence, but the intent was unmistakable. Aisha saw it all from the park bench. She gathered the children quickly, face pale with shock and returning fear. When I reached her, she was trembling, dizziness overtaking her, one hand on her belly, the other clutching Jamal. "They know," she whispered, voice breaking. "Because of me, because I'm here." The self-blame tore at me. Emotional rupture showed in her eyes, the old powerlessness resurfacing, the humiliation of being a burden, the terror that her presence endangered us all. Tears fell silently. I pulled her close, shielding her and the children with my body. "No," I said fiercely, "because of me, and I will end it." That night, back at the estate, the betrayal's full weight crashed over us. Aisha sat on the bed, knees drawn up, staring at nothing. The pregnancy made her more vulnerable, nausea returning with stress, exhaustion deepening. "If something happens to you, or the kids, because of me." I knelt before her, taking her hands. "Nothing will happen, I swear it." But inside, the turmoil reached apocalyptic intensity. Remorse for dragging her into danger, for the life I could not fully escape. Passionate love for her strength, her fear, her everything, clashing with guilt that I had failed to protect her completely. The inner conflict was numbing, tearing, a man of immense power brought low by the terror of loss. She looked at me then, eyes swimming. "Daniel, he was your friend. Like a brother." The pain of that betrayal mirrored her own abandonments. We held each other in silence, the emotional peak profound. Shared grief over trust broken. Shared determination to protect what we had built. I escalated security, more men, new protocols. Confrontations multiplied. A tense standoff at a neutral club, words cutting deeper than blades. A blocked shipment reclaimed through presence alone. Danger circled closer, suspense thickening. Yet in the quiet moments between, her head on my chest as we listened to rain, my hand on her belly feeling the first flutters of life, the bond deepened. Passion flared brighter against the threat, each touch a defiance. The betrayal from within had exposed our vulnerability, but it also forged us stronger, her trust absolute, my resolve unbreakable. We would face what came next together, no matter the cost. The betrayal had exposed the fracture, but it was the direct attack that shattered what remained of my restraint. It happened on a gray afternoon in late October 2025. The sky heavy with the threat of rain. Aisha, now visibly pregnant and radiant despite the strain, had taken the children to the enclosed garden for fresh air. The estate's walls were high, the security layered, but nothing is impenetrable when treachery has already opened the gate from within. The assault came swiftly. 2 vehicles breaching a service entrance compromised by Daniel's lingering codes, men pouring onto the grounds with purpose. Not an all-out war, too risky in Bel Air, but a targeted strike. Grab Aisha or one of the children, leveraged to force my hand. Alarms screamed. Victor and the team responded in seconds, containing the breach at the garden perimeter. I ran from the study, heart pounding with a terror I had not felt since the night I lost my wife and daughter. The inner turmoil reached its most violent crescendo. Remorse for every choice that had led to this moment. Passionate love roaring like a furnace, demanding I end the threat forever. I reached the garden as the first shots, warning only, cracked the air. Aisha had shielded the children behind a stone fountain, her body curled over them, face pale with shock and raw fear. Kamaya wailed. Jamal clung silent and trembling. Min Jae rocked with hands over ears. The sight tore me apart. Her, who had known only cold winds and abandonment, now facing violence because of me. One intruder broke through the line, mask obscuring his face, weapon raised, not to fire but to intimidate. He lunged toward the fountain. I intercepted him. No hesitation. I disarmed him with brutal efficiency, the years of calculated ruthlessness surging forward. He hit the ground hard, breath knocked out. The others, seeing me personally in the fray, faltered. Victor's team closed in. The intruders fled, leaving one behind, wounded but alive. The garden fell silent except for the children's cries. I dropped to my knees beside Aisha, pulling her and the children into my arms. She trembled violently, dizziness overtaking her, face ashen as emotional numbness gave way to tearing pain. "They came for us," she whispered, voice breaking, "because of who you are." The words were not accusation, but devastated truth. Tears streamed down her face, shoulders shaking with the overwhelming rupture. The terror of nearly losing her children, the resurgence of powerlessness after tasting safety. I held her tighter, remorse a blade in my chest. "Never again," I vowed, voice rough with fury and grief. That night, after the children slept, sedated lightly by the doctor, safe in rooms now guarded doubly, I unleashed what I had long restrained. I went alone to the rival stronghold, a warehouse in downtown Los Angeles, neutral on paper but theirs in practice. No army, just me, Victor, at a distance. I walked in openly, the act itself a statement of absolute dominance. The leader waited, smug, until he saw my face. We spoke in a back room, words low and lethal. I laid out the cost of their mistake. Territories surrendered, alliances severed, key operations crippled. Not through war, but through precision, Information I now held because Daniel's betrayal had backfired, exposing their weaknesses. They accepted because refusal meant annihilation. But the true sacrifice came in the hours after. Back home, dawn creeping gray through the windows, I sat with Aisha in the study. She had not slept, eyes red from tears and fear. The children were safe, but the damage lingered. "I can't lose you," she whispered, hand on her belly. "Any of you." The words broke me. The inner turmoil peaked, violent, numbing. Remorse for the danger, passionate love demanding I choose. I could not have both worlds, the empire and this family. I made the decision then, the most shocking of my life. "I'm stepping away," I said quietly, "surrendering key territories, dissolving alliances. Enough wealth remains, clean, legitimate, to keep us safe forever. But the darkness, I walk from it." Her eyes widened in shock, then deep confusion. "But it's who you are. Everything you built." "It's what took my first family," I said, voice cracking. "I won't let it take this one." Tears fell anew, hers, mine. The emotional rupture was profound. Her disorientation at the scale of sacrifice, my grief for the identity I was laying down. But beneath it, relief, overwhelming, healing. In the days that followed, I executed the exit with ruthless precision. Meetings in shadowed rooms, terms dictated, assets transferred to trusted successors who owed me silence. Rivals accepted, wary of the man who could have destroyed them, choosing peace instead. Danger receded like a tide. The sacrifice cost dearly, power diminished, old allies distant, a part of me buried with the empire. But in the quiet that remained, something bloomed. Aisha held me that final night of transition, her belly between us, hands framing my face. "You gave up everything. For us." "For you," I corrected, the passionate love burning steady now, no longer warring with guilt. "For all of you." She kissed me then, slow, deep, filled with awe and returned devotion. The emotional peak was tender, condensed, years of her deprivation answered by abundance, my isolation ended by her presence. The ruthless response had neutralized the threat. The sacrifice had freed us. In the aftermath, with the children laughing in sunlit rooms and Aisha's hand in mine, I felt, for the first time, whole. The cost had been immense, but the family now safe within these walls was worth every piece of the empire I laid down. The sacrifice was complete. By the end of October 2025, the empire I had built over decades lay dismantled. Territory surrendered, alliances divorced, power traded for peace. The rivals accepted the terms, wary of the man who could have crushed them, choosing instead to walk away. Wealth remained, legitimate holdings, investments, enough to sustain generations, but the darkness receded like a shadow at dawn. The cost was profound. Old loyalties severed, a part of my identity buried forever. Yet in the quiet that followed, something extraordinary bloomed. The estate, once a fortress of isolation, became a home alive with voices. Min Jae's careful laughter mingled with Jamal's exuberant shouts, and Kamaya's delighted babbling. Aisha moved through the rooms with growing confidence, her pregnancy now a gentle swell that she touched often, as if reminding herself it was real. The children called her mommy without hesitation, and increasingly they reached for me too. Small hands in mine, questions about stars or stories at bedtime. I watched it all with a heart both healed and forever scarred. The inner turmoil did not vanish entirely. Remorse lingered, a quiet ache for the dangers I had brought close, for the years lost to ruthlessness. But the passionate love that had anchored me through the storm now held steady, a constant flame. Every glance from Aisha, every shared smile over the children's play, tempered the guilt with gratitude. I had given up power to keep them safe, and in return, they had given me life. One crisp October evening, the air carrying the first true bite of fall, we gathered in the garden for Min Jae's 7th birthday. I had kept it small, just us, no outsiders, no reminders of the past. The terrace was strung with simple lights, tables set with Korean banchan beside American classics, kimchi and fried chicken, rice and cornbread. The children wore outfits blending traditions. Min-jae in a small hanbok-inspired vest. Jamal and Kamaya in bright colors Aisha had chosen. Min-jae sat at the center, eyes wide at the cake, chocolate with stars piped in icing, his request. He blew out the candles carefully, counting under his breath, then looked up at me with a smile I had rarely seen, open, unguarded. Aisha stood beside me, hand resting on her belly. The new life kicked off, and now, a secret rhythm between us. She leaned into my side, voice soft. He's happy, really happy. I wrapped an arm around her, the love surging fierce and quiet. Because of you. She shook her head, tears glistening. Because of us. The moment was tender, condensed, a reflection of everything we had survived. From a fevered cry on a red-eye flight to this, a family forged across impossible divides. Later, when the children slept and the house settled into night, I led Aisha to the rooftop garden. The city light spread below, distant and harmless now. I had prepared nothing grand, just us, under strings of lanterns glowing soft gold. I knelt before her, ring in hand, a simple band with a single stone, chosen for meaning rather than flash. Aisha, I said, voice steady despite the emotion choking me. You pulled me from darkness I didn't know I was in. You gave me family when I thought it lost forever. Marry me. Let me spend every day proving you and our children deserve the world. Shock widened her eyes, then tears fell in a rush. Disorientation flickered, dizziness as the weight of it settled, followed by joy so profound she swayed. She sank to her knees before me, hands framing my face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Alexander, with everything I am. We kissed under the lanterns, the embrace slow and deep, passion tempered by the peace we had earned. The emotional peak was quiet yet overwhelming. Her past of cold winds and hunger answered by warmth and abundance. My isolation ended by her unwavering presence. In the months that followed, still within the grace of October's extended light, we married in the garden, vows simple and true. The children stood with us, rings carried on pillows they had decorated themselves. Life became ordinary in the best way. School runs, bedtime stories, Aisha's laughter in the kitchen as she taught me to make cornbread. The new baby arrived, a boy we named Tae-jun, strong and healthy. Min-jae held him first among the children, careful and solemn, Jamal and Kamaya peering over his shoulders in awe. I look back now and see the knowledge woven through every step. Knowledge that love transcends barriers. Knowledge that compassion costs but heals. Knowledge that true power lies in choosing family over empire. This is the life lesson. Wealth and poverty are fleeting states, but humanity endures. This is the life lesson. Kindness on a turbulent night can rewrite destinies. This is the life lesson. Education of the heart matters more than any ledger. This is the life lesson. Knowledge of another's pain opens doors to shared joy. This is the life lesson. Education and forgiveness of self and others builds the strongest homes. Love, in the end, knows no skin color, no social class. It crosses every divide, proving that the human heart is boundless when opened. To all of you watching, may good health fill your days, may joy light your paths, may peace settle gently in your homes each night. If this story touched you, please subscribe to Crimson Romance Stories, like this video, and share it with someone who needs hope today. Tell me in the comments, how did this story make you feel? Does it echo anything in your own life? Share your thoughts, your emotions. I read every one. Goodbye for now, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.